It was a Friday night in Columbus, Ohio, March 31st, 2006. The air was crisp, one of those early spring evenings that still carried a bite of winter. College kids swarmed the streets near Ohio State University, bar hopping, laughing, shouting over one another as they crammed into booths or spilled onto patios. It was the start of spring break, and Brian Shaffer was in the mood to celebrate. Tall, handsome, and just 27 years old, Brian had every reason to be optimistic. He was finishing up his second year of medical school at OSU, a grueling schedule that left little room for fun. But that Friday marked the beginning of a much-needed break. Even better, he'd just planned a trip to Miami with his girlfriend Alexis. They were supposed to fly out that Monday, but Brian never made it to the plane. He never made it home. He walked into a bar called the Ugly Tuna Saloona. And as far as anyone can tell, he never walked out. Not once. Not on camera. Not on foot. Not alive. Not dead. He simply vanished. And nearly 2 decades later, no one has been able to explain how. Brian had already been through hell. Just weeks earlier, he'd buried his mother. Renee Shaffer had died after a 3-year battle with myelodysplasia, a rare and deadly blood condition. It had been brutal. Brian, the older of 2 sons, had stayed strong. He supported his little brother, Derek. He comforted his father, Randy. He kept up with med school classes through the grief. But the loss lingered in his eyes. Alexis, his girlfriend and fellow med student, said he wasn't quite himself. Still loving, still sweet, still talking about marriage. But there was a sadness there. That night, March 31st, Brian needed a break. His friend Clint Florence invited him out for a few drinks. They started at the Ugly Tuna Saloona around 9 p.m., a second-story bar near campus with a single escalator leading to its entrance. Security cameras overlooked the bar's only access point. After one drink, Brian called Alexis. She was out of town visiting her parents. It was a short call, nothing unusual. She said he sounded tired, but she had no idea it would be the last time she'd ever hear his voice. From there, the night gets blurry. Brian and Clint met up with another friend, Meredith Reed. She offered them a ride back to the bar district after a few stops. They bounced between places, drinking, laughing, bar hopping like any group of college friends on spring break. Around 1:15 a.m., they returned to the Ugly Tuna Saloona. Surveillance video confirmed it. Brian, Clint, and Meredith are clearly seen riding the escalator up to the bar. Brian is wearing jeans, a black t-shirt, and flip-flops. He seems relaxed, joking around as they disappear into the bar's main room. Then, nothing. No footage of him coming back down. No footage of him exiting through the front. No trace of him leaving through the back, because the back door led only to a locked service area, covered by motion-activated cameras and inaccessible to patrons. There were no other exits. But somehow, when the bar closed and the lights came up, Brian was gone. At first, no one panicked. It was just after 2 a.m. Bars had closed. The streets were packed. Clint and Meredith waited for Brian outside the bar. But when he didn't show, they assumed he'd walked home. Maybe he'd met someone. Maybe he'd gone back to his apartment. They texted him, called. No answer. Still, it wasn't until Alexis tried to reach him the next morning, with no reply, that the fear began to creep in. He wasn't answering texts. His phone rang but went to voicemail. By Sunday, he'd missed meetings, calls, family check-ins. By Monday morning, when he didn't show up at the airport for their trip to Miami, Alexis knew something was horribly wrong. She called Brian's father, and by that afternoon, the Columbus police had opened a missing persons case. Investigators reviewed the footage from the Ugly Tuna Saloona. They watched the tapes over and over. There he was, Brian, going up the escalator at 1:15 a.m. They watched hours of footage. They saw Clint and Meredith come back down. They saw patrons leaving. But not Brian. Not in any frame, not even in the background, Officers thought maybe he'd slipped out disguised, so they scrutinized every person leaving the bar that night, frame by frame, looking for someone in a black t-shirt and jeans. Someone wearing flip-flops, someone his height, nothing. It was as if the earth had opened up and swallowed him whole. There were theories, of course. Some said he left through a service door and fell to his death in a nearby construction site. But police searched the area. Cadaver dogs were brought in, no sign of a body. Others thought he was abducted, that someone inside the bar, maybe someone he knew, had lured him away. But no one saw anything. There were no reports of a fight, no screams, no witnesses. Others thought he walked away on purpose, that the grief from his mother's death had been too much, that he'd cracked, faked his disappearance, started a new life. But Brian's wallet, keys, and glasses were never found. He never touched his bank account, never used his credit cards, never contacted friends or family. He missed his own med school graduation. He never called Alexis again, not even once. Then came the strangest part. Weeks after his disappearance, Brian's phone rang. It was months into the investigation. The number pinged a cell tower in Hilliard, Ohio, about 14 miles from Columbus. His voicemail played, but when police traced the signal, nothing. The carrier said it was likely just a glitch, a phantom ping. But to Brian's family, it was a gut punch, a flicker of false hope, and another door slammed shut. As weeks turned into months, Brian's case grew cold. Theories multiplied online. Some said he was killed in the bar, hidden in the ceiling or a freezer. Others insisted he'd been trafficked. Some blamed Clint, the friend who refused to take a lie detector test. Others accused the bar staff. But nothing stuck. No evidence, no confession, no body. Brian Shaffer had simply vanished. Years passed. Alexis held out hope. She called his phone every night for months just to hear his voice. Eventually, she moved on. Brian's younger brother, Derek, got married, without his best man. And in 2008, tragedy struck again. Brian's father, Randy Shaffer, died in a freak accident, struck by a falling tree during a windstorm. Before his death, Randy had spoken to the media, begged for answers. He believed Brian was alive, somewhere, somehow. But whatever hope he carried died with him. In the years since, Brian's case has become a kind of modern legend, a real-life ghost story. A man who walked into a bar and disappeared, with no exits, no trace, no resolution. Web sleuths still dig through the footage, podcasters still chase leads. Anonymous tips still come in from time to time, each one leading nowhere. In 2021, the FBI released an age-progressed photo of what Brian might look like today. A reward was offered. Still, silence. The ugly Tuna Saloona eventually closed its doors. The escalator still stands, motionless, quiet, stained by time. Some nights, locals say, the old building feels strange, as if it's holding a secret, a memory it won't let go of. A place that swallowed a man whole and forgot to give him back. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories, if you dare.